So next on the agenda, we asked to move the reports up. At this time, Marv, who do we have to talk tonight?
Yes, Mayor and Council, I appreciate you so much for being flexible on the agenda. I would like to invite Frank Acosta, Commander from the Brighton Police Department, currently acting as the interim chief as the chief is out. He will join us. Between the two of us, we can explain a situation. And the reason we asked to talk about this up front, we know it's on everyone's mind. It's out in the public, it's out in the media, it's in the news. We find it sometimes helpful just to talk about it straight on and be open and honest. The issue I'm talking about, there was a press release that went out today. Often press releases are fairly tightly worded and not the same as just explaining eyeball to eyeball, what's going on. So I'll talk a little bit and then turn it over to Frank. But first, I would like to start with the main purpose of this, and that is to publicly apologize to one of our residents. His name is Matt Mooney. He's a resident and he was at the park and an event happened and he was involved in with our police. And we have come out now and said, look, we made a mistake and we're sorry. I called him and talked to him privately and told him that, offered to come and meet him at his house with Commander Acosta, and also committed to doing this publicly tonight. Sometimes it's helpful just to go over the events. It is in the press release, but basically the gist of the matter is Sunday afternoon, it's nice and quiet. Everyone's enjoying their time on a nice day. Several people are at the park and the police received a call from dispatch, a complaint by a resident out in the Brighton East Farms neighborhood near Donaldson Park that there was a large group of people gathered and playing softball. So they went out there, they took a look, they did see that this group was there. They had concern about the current state and county orders, which all of us can attest are very recent and overlapping and ever changing and a little bit difficult to keep track of what the order of the day is. So we did have signs posted in the park indicating that the playground structures, the restroom, the pavilion, and any other facilities like that were closed. The remainder of the park, however, is open. And at the time, they did ask this large group to disperse, which they did voluntarily. But as they were dispersing, there was a gentleman not part of that group, and that was Mr. Mooney. And he ended up having a discussion with the police about whether they needed to disperse or not. And it turns out he's correct in that they were just there playing ball in the park and not using any of the facilities. The police ended up detaining him for about 10 minutes and then having him released. They did not arrest him. They did not drive him away. And that is what we're apologizing for. You have a gentleman out in the park with his family enjoying Sunday afternoon and then ending up being detained. And so that's not what we want for anyone. In fact, I would like to take this time to encourage people to use the open space and the trails and the parks. I think it's one of the very few ways that we can still get out and be healthy and find a healthy mental and physical place. I'm seeing it all the time near my house. It's so great to see families out walking, biking, running, playing with their dogs on the trails in the open space. And we highly encourage that. There's confusion at the parks. And I think at the time, the police were trying to do their best. They were under the impression that the park was closed and were asking people to disperse. So that's where this all came about. And basically, I just like to finish up with basically saying that we're conducting an investigation. We take this very seriously. We did not brush it off. We did not immediately jump to a conclusion one way or another. We are still in a police investigation. It is not normal for us to talk at this point because we have not ascertained all the facts. So we will continue that mainly to prevent anything like this from happening again, to make sure that the first responders are getting accurate information so that they're clear as they're out enforcing the rules. These are actually state and tri-county health orders. These are not even City of Brighton orders. So we're operating on a new paradigm in a vastly changing situation. This is not normal business for our police officers or first responders. I believe in our police officers. I believe in their intentions, and I support them in what they do. It's difficult out there. It's scary out there. And I think there's a lot of fear in the community. And that's why we got the call in the first place. That's why people were asked to disperse from the large group. So we all understand that. I think we need to come together. We need to stand together as a community. And I don't know that it's helpful to have anyone outside of our community try and resolve this through the media or any other way. This is our issue. This is our family. This is our community. We can figure it out on our own. And I just apologize sincerely to this resident of our community, Mr. Matt Mooney, for what he went through that day in front of his family. Very sincerely. I'll turn it over to Frank to add anything you have.
Thank you, Mr. Falkenberg. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of City Council. This morning I discussed with Acting City Manager Mark Falkenberg about meeting with Mr. Mooney and offering a public apology from the Brighton Police Department concerning the events that occurred this past Sunday at Donaldson Park. I've been advised that Mr. Mooney has declined to meet with us at this time. I would still like to offer a public apology to Mr. Mooney, his wife, and his daughter, and say that the Brighton Police Department is sorry and deeply regrets the events that unfolded at Donaldson Park this past Sunday. Officers were dispatched to the park on a large group gathering, and then the events that led to officers interacting with Mr. Mooney and his family are still under investigation at this time. But it appears there was some misunderstanding on the officers' part, thinking that the park was closed. Mr. Mooney and his family were asked to leave the park, which was wrong on the officer's part, but it was an honest mistake. Mr. Mooney was unfortunately placed into the back of a patrol car and detained for about 10 minutes. Mr. Mooney was released, and we deeply regret that his daughter and his wife had to observe this. We want to ensure the residents of Brighton that we're taking every step that we can to keep up with the constant changes that are happening around us every day at this time. We have reiterated to our officers that we need to be using proper PPE when dealing with the public. And we want to assure everyone that we're trying to do the right things. Our goal is for a safe environment for all of our citizens. And we want to make sure all officers are current with the policies of this department, any changes that are occurring, so this doesn't happen again. And again, we truly apologize to Mr. Mooney and his family. Can I answer any questions, please?
Thank you, Commander Acosta, and thank you, Mr. Falkenberg, for talking about this, letting us know the facts as of at least this point. I know this is still under investigation, and I don't want to taint an investigation. I want to let that investigation play out before we say too much. But I do want to also offer an apology to Mr. Mooney for how he felt he was treated and how he was how the situation was handled. I'd like to still know more facts. I tried reaching out to Mr. Mooney today, mostly to talk and try to understand his take out of it. And I didn't hear back from him. I would have reached out yesterday, but I had to deal with a personal matter, an urgent personal matter yesterday. So I hate for our department to looks tainted like this. And there's a lot of good that happens in the Brighton Police Department. That, for the public listening, this is a real, I'm going to put this as a plug. Every year, the Brighton Police Department has a Citizen Police Academy. And I urge you to, if you have any time, take some time to join that. It's a time to learn about what our police does and what they do, what they go through. And so, but at the same time, we're not trying to, get after people for going out and just being in the park. We want to still promote social distancing and not being in large groups, but we know people still have their choices, and I respect that. Does anybody have any comments or questions for either city manager or Commander Acosta? I see Councilmember Cushing's got his hand up.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just wanted to thank Mr. Falkenberg and Commander Acosta for coming on and saying all of that publicly. It's definitely important that we remember that our officers are out there, while we're all home, keeping our city safe and trying to protect our community. And it definitely was something I think that could be anticipated, that there might be some confusion on the enforcement side. A statewide stay-at-home order is totally uncharted territory. I still think we need to look at passing our own local rules and clarify what that enforcement can look like, so it's a little bit more clear. But I also think it's important we recognize that we're all human and people make mistakes, and we have excellent officers at Brighton PD. This is definitely not a typical experience people have with our police department, and I'm confident it's an isolated incident. So I would just ask people to have a little grace and a little understanding and patience for our PD, who's dealing with, they're dealing with a lot right now. They're trying to figure out how to keep us safe, how to enforce our laws, how to keep themselves safe. And they just don't have an easy job. So I'm hoping, a little more grace and patience than what I've been seeing on social media and things like that. Definitely, cities doing the right thing, admitting that they made a mistake. And so now we just need to be forgiving and understanding that this isn't a normal everyday where, we're dealing with new, changing, evolving rules from different levels of government, statewide, countywide, health department. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Councilmember Cushing. Any more questions or comments from council? I'll look down the line here. No more? Oh, Councilmember Pollack.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, to my understanding, there was a sign up that said the park was closed. Am I correct?
The sign is very specific about what portions of the park are closed and what is not closed. It's a fairly small sign placed in front of structures like playgrounds, shelters, and restrooms, not out in the open where a lot of the people were. But there are signs at all the parks.
Okay. So obviously there was some confusion. It's not going to be the first time, and it's not going to be the last time. They change almost on a daily. 10 people can get together, then 6 people can get together. Then you got to be 6 feet apart. Then you don't need to wear a mask. Then you do have to wear a mask. Then you don't need gloves. Then you do need gloves. Hell, we're all confused. People are starting to get cabin fever, and it's starting to wear on people. This is not the way of our life in this country. And so it's difficult. I think that our police officers do the best they can. Maybe they just, they're under a little pressure themselves. Their chief is not available right now, and they have problems, concerns. So I think it was just an honest mistake. And I think that we just, like you said, we've apologized and we're sorry it happened. And if they could get things straight a little higher up, the president and the governor, we might be able to get it straight. So anyhow, I'm sorry that it happened, but hopefully it doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pollack. Councilmember Watts, I see your hands up. I know you live near Donaldson Park.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Real quick, first off, as Mr. Mooney knows, and I've spoken to him, I am truly sorry that this happened. Sorry that it happened for him, his family, as well as our police officers having to go through this. But just to clear it up, though, yes, there are signs in the park, but they clearly say that you can use the open space. You can walk through the park. You just can't use the amenities. So that's where my confusion is on how did the officers not know that they couldn't be there if it says on the sign they can be there. So that's that's my confusion is I don't want to drag this out all night. I mean, it's a very unfortunate situation that took place 2 blocks away from me. And it's very sad that it happened. And I don't think it'll be the last time it happens anywhere in this nation. And as Councilmember Pollack had mentioned, people need to get it straight. I mean, from the president on down, need to figure out what the rules are going to be. You know, one state's, we're going to have stay in place till this day. Then another mayor says another day. And then the governor says this, the president says that. You know, I don't know, the president of the United States seems like he's the president of the United States. So if he says we're going to do stay in place till the end of the month, and I think these states should get on board with that. But you know, apparently we have power struggles in different states and different parties, and that's a downside with it. And you know, very unfortunate situation that took place. I'm sorry for the officers that had to go through it. I'm extremely and deeply sorry for Mr. Mooney and his family that he had to go through it. But that's all I had to say. I appreciate it. We just need to be more clear, I think.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Watts. Any more comment or questions by council? Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate the comments. Thank you, Commander Acosta, for coming here. And I guess I first, like we all have, I want to apologize to Matt Mooney. I live blocks away from the park. I started getting calls about this right when it was happening. And it was from concerned constituents about what the order means. So I want to go over some of the mistakes that were made, both then and as we go forward. One obvious one, it's kind of said by Councillor Watts, is those signs are too small. They are in a place where you can't see what they are. So I'll give the benefit of the doubt to the officers, definitely, that didn't understand the rule. I also want to lay blame, and this is hard to do. I know we're in politics. We're not supposed to say that we're sorry, but we should be sorry as a council because we didn't give the correct direction downward in order for the officers to understand the order from our perspective. We keep talking about the state, and I appreciate that. Don't get me wrong, anyone that spoke about the state and the federal government role in this, but we have our own role. A couple weeks ago, we had a special meeting. It feels like a couple weeks ago. I think it was only a week ago. But we had a special meeting, and we had an opportunity, I think, that we all missed, including me, is to discuss these kinds of things. Let's look at some scenarios that we're going to have to deal with and give direction both to our city manager downward into the police department itself so they understand. But let's also not downplay this mistake. It was a mistake made by one officer. We have a professional police department like most people don't know. They don't understand. Many cities don't have the kind of level of department that we do have. This was an officer that, as reports have shown and emails that I've received, he was in training. He made a mistake, and it was a huge mistake. Let's not forget, Matt Mooney had his, I believe, 6-year-old daughter in the park with him. I always, my temper, I hope, wouldn't have gotten a hold of me. If that would have happened with my 3-year-old daughter, maybe I would have gotten more charges than he got. I'm scared about that. I always think about if I personally would have been in that situation. But I also understand where the officers were at. The reality of what we did wrong was also the reaction is we need to think about what consensus is coming from, in my opinion. And I've discussed this with the city manager, the acting city manager, and the mayor previously, is let's think about what consensus we can come up with as a council to both give that directive. And then when these things happen, be able to figure out what we want to do from there. A 2-day apology 2 days after the fact is probably not sufficient as compared to what could have been an apology right away just for the false arrest for the crime that was supposedly committed. And I just want to be clear about what we are doing and that we as a council did not give any kind of directive to arrest anybody in a park, arrest anyone for any of this fines, summons, or what I wanted to talk about. And we all did previously is what kind of summons, what kind of fine can we give as a council inside of our city just for this? And I was told it's very hard to do that, but is it harder to do that? Or is it harder to turn back negative media about what just occurred? I just really want us to take time, hopefully at the next meeting, to say, okay, here's some other scenarios that could come up. And let's figure out what directive we can give. But once again, Mr. Mooney, I do know you personally, and I really do apologize for what happened. And police department, keep up the work that you do need to do. We appreciate you. You guys are heroes. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Any more comments and questions before we move on? Okay, I don't see any hands right now. All right. Thank you, Mr. Falkenberg and Mr. Acosta for coming on and explaining this. Thank you very much.